Welcome to another one of Roghnu's Power BI training video series. In this video, we're going to learn about how to work with the relationships in the data model. So after you've cleaned your data, you've done your transformations in the query editor, and then you load the data into the data model, the next thing that you need to do is establish the proper relationships between those tables. If you don't do this, then once you start creating visuals, you're going to find that your numbers don't add up properly, or you get repeated numbers. So in order to create our relationships, we go to the model view here, click on that. And as you can see, we already have our data model established. We have the relationships established already, but I'm going to walk you through and explain this and also demonstrate how to create relationships. Now, if you're not used to this can look kind of daunting, confusing. There's a bunch of boxes and lines. Like, what is this? It looks like what I like to refer to it as is a computer circuit board. And you can imagine where there are data models that are twice as large as this, meaning you have twice as many tables and therefore a lot more lines. So it can be confusing on, where's this line coming from and going to. There are ways to simplify this, and we'll get into that. But here we have our relationships, and each line represents a relationship between two tables. So for example, if I hover over this line here, that highlights green, we see that the dim location table, location ID gets highlighted there because this relationship is based on the location ID table. And we see that this is going to this table, meaning location ID exists in this one as well. So if I scroll down, we can find that. It's in here somewhere sometimes. So it probably oh, here we go. Inventory item location ID. So if I hover over this again, you see that gets highlighted there. All right, so here we have our relationship between these two tables. You'll notice that this one right here says 1, and this one has an asterisk. What's the difference between that? Well, the 1 means 1, and the asterisk means many. So 1 and many. Or many and 1, depending on the way you go. So 1 and many of what? Well, again, this is based on the location ID column. So that means since this is on the one side, there is only one location ID or one instance for each location ID in the in the dim location table. So if you have a location ID of say 123, that is only going to show up once in this table. But on the mini side, well, that means that location ID can appear more than once. All right, it may only exist once in this table here, but it may exist more than one time. So that's the difference between 1 and many. And you see too that all the tables at the top, they all have 1s, right? They're on the 1 side. And all the ones down here, they're on the mini side. We see asterisks everywhere. So that doesn't matter. I can click on this, I can drag this, I can move this up here. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. It's just how this is the standard way of laying out this is called a diagram view of your data model. So this is a standard way of laying out your diagram, your data model, where you have your dimension tables at the top and your fact tables at the bottom. Again, dimension tables contain your dimensions. So think categories, like how you slice your data. And then fact tables contain your numbers. Think transactions, sales, purchases, stuff like that, numerical columns. All right, so here is our overall data model. Now over here I can zoom in if I want. I can drag around or scroll. I can zoom out. We can see everything. Zoom in a little bit. Now you'll see there are some tables here that are not connected, right? They have no established relationships, and that's okay. Um, so it will depend on the table. So in the case of this dim period table, this is just not being used currently in the reporting, but it's there in case it needs to be used, right? The relationship can be established and then it can be utilized. Here you'll see that these two begin with PRM, and that stands for parameter. So these are parameter tables. You don't have to use PRM. You name these when you create these, but it's pretty customary to begin these with PRM, just so it's obvious that these are parameter tables. And before we get into, what are these and other aspects of the data model, while we're on parameter tables, let me show you how you can create a parameter table. All right, so these are not imported into the data model from, say, a SQL database. These are created in the PBX file itself. So if I go back here to the report view, and then I go to modeling, here I have new parameter. I can choose a numeric range. I can choose fields. I'm gonna go ahead and choose fields. All right, and after selecting it, you can change it if you need to. And here's the naming. So this is where we have PRM underscore. I'll just say my table for this demo. Now, basically, what I can do now is I can drag over measures that I want in this parameter. Let's do AP invoice count. We'll do AP invoice amount. And let's do one more. AP build distinct vendors. We'll just do this one as of today. So we have 3 different measures in here. Okay, so I have by default add slicer to this page is checked. I'm going to leave that checked so I can demonstrate how you can use this. And I'll click create. So we look down here. Here's our parameter table. It just got created. All right, we got that check mark there because it's selected, it's highlighted. So I'll expand that. There we see our PRM my table. All right, so here are our measures. All right, so what can I do with this? Well, let's create a bar chart. Right, just expand this. All right, and since these are all AP measures, all right, so accounts payable. So I'm gonna go ahead and find the dim vendor table, and I'll drag over name. All right, so we have vendor names in there. Now I'm going to come to my parameter table that I created, and I'm going to add this to the x-axis here. All right, and here we see the measure. So what do these bars represent? Well, they represent the measures right here that we added to this parameter. So I can select one of them, right, and only that shows. So this is AP invoice count. I can switch that to AP invoice amount, and then AP invoice amount as of today. So you can change how, basically you can switch between different measures in a visual. So very, very neat, very handy. So that's an example of what a parameter table is. Now you can also create, so if I go back to modeling, new parameter, numeric range. So this, like it sounds, just like it sounds, you're creating a numeric range with increments. So you can give it your name. We'll say PRM, my range. All right, you can do whole number, decimal, or fixed decimal. We'll do whole number. And let's say I want to start at 100 and end at 500. And I want to increase by increments of 100. Right. And default will be 100. Add slicer, hit create. All right, so here we have our slicer. So I can, you see, just slide this across, and that number gets changed. Go from the max, go from the max to the lowest of 100. So you can imagine, there's different scenarios you can use for a range, numerical range slicer like this. So you could incorporate this measure, this range, in another measure, right? And when you adjust your range, the output of that measure gets adjusted as well. So, there's all kinds of uses for the parameters in here. Use your imagination. They're very handy. It allows for very dynamic reporting. So if we go back now to the model view, all right, we have last refresh date here. There's no established relationship between this and any of the tables because we're just returning a single value in this. So if I can go back to transform data, which again is the query editor, you see we have last refresh date time here. And if I do open up the advanced editor, you see the steps involved in creating this. And so the idea here is just to return date and time so that whenever the data gets refreshed, that date and time of the refresh gets returned. And so let me exit out of this and go back to the report view, and you see that that's getting used here. All right, so last reference date time, created a measure where we have this text last refreshed, and then we're concatenating that date time. Okay, and then returning it here in this visual. So that's all that table is there in the data model. And then this measures list is just a neat way to organize your measures. So there's basically two approaches you have here. So it's just easier to show it in the report view. So I could, create all my measures in the tables that the measures are based on. As you can see here, we do have some measures in dim customer, right? So I could also, there's none in this table, but I could right click and I could create a measure and it'll be added to this AR aging table. So I could create a measure for the AR aging table, which we do have measures for AR aging, but we have them stored here, right? So here you see we have all these here's AR aging. So we just have all of our measures organized here in this measures list table. Now, when you're creating your report, your PBX file, you don't have to do this. Not everyone does it. Some people will prefer that all the measures be in the tables that they pertain to. Other people prefer organizing all their measures together in a neat way like this. In order to do this, all you have to do is you go to enter data, and you don't do anything. Just leave that as it is, and you just change the name to, this would be, measures list. I'll do measures list 2 since we already have measures list. And then I just do load data. All right, so it's creating this empty table, right? This is an empty table. It's creating this in our data model. Let me close this. And here we see measures list 2. If I expand that, there's that empty column 1 that has nothing in it. So again, I could right click here and I can do new measure, and now I can start just adding all of my measures here. Another thing to keep in mind, when you create a measure, you can move it around. So if I go back to measures list here, and let's say we have AR aging count. Let's say I want this housed in the AR aging table. Well, I just select a measure, go up here to home table, and change that to AR aging. And that's going to disappear from here and get moved to the AR aging table there. Okay. So going back to the relationship view here, that's what this measures list table is and why there's no relationship established with it. Okay, so initially I mentioned how confusing all this can look, right? You have a lot of boxes, a lot of lines. Well, there's a way to view this more neatly. So here you can see I've created additional tabs. You can do that by just clicking new layout, right? And then let's go to our tables, and if I drag AP bill all in here, all right, and then we have AP bill in there. And then let me bring in some dimension tables, say not dim customers, do dim vendor. Look at that. that relationship automatically gets created. Why? Because AP bill all is already related to DM vendor here on this tab, right? So the purpose of doing this is not to create new relationships, right? I'm not building out the data model. I'm just organizing. So I can get all of my AP related tables organized together in their own tab, like I have here, accounts, or right here, accounts payable, right? So here I have AP aging trend, AP bill all, right? And the dim tables. All right, so that's neatly organized. If I just interested in looking at the relationship between AP bills and the dim tables, I can come to this view. It's just easier to see. And I could create measured or relationships here that would also populate to this view here. And again, I have accounts receivable here. All right, so here we have all our accounts receivable tables and their relationships neatly organized. So this is just to help because Microsoft understands that this can be really confusing, especially if you have more tables than this. It makes it easier to work with relationships if you can break them out into various groups. So that's something that you can do as you're building out your measures. Now there's two ways you can create a measure between a table. So one way is you can go to manage relationships. This is not the way I prefer. Some people prefer doing it this way. Again, you'll end up having your own preference, but I'm going to show you this way first. So manage relationships, and here we see all the relationships that exist. So we have the from column, from side, and the to side, right? So the many side to the one side. You'll see the arrows too, right? It goes from the one to the many. So the arrow is the filter direction. So this means that dim location filters AP aging trend. So if I apply a filter on dim location, that's going to propagate to AP aging trend. If I apply a filter to AP aging trend, it will not propagate to dim location, right? So that's all that means there. So all you have to do is you go to new relationship, you choose your from column. So AP, it could be, so here we'll do a mini. So AP bill all, our to column. Let's see, we dim item. And then we would just scroll through and find, okay, what columns are these related on? So AP bill all has item ID in it. So I would just scroll through and find that. This is a little tricky here. It's not the easiest to see, but it's here somewhere. Basically, once I find AP bill item ID, basically all I do is I click on it. This is in it, but I would just click on that column, and then I click on the item ID column in this table as well, which is here somewhere, right? And I would click on it. That's not it, but you get the idea. Imagine that this is the item ID column. This is the item ID column. I selected those. That relationship is established. And then it would be many to one. So I clicked on columns that have multiple instances, which is why it says many to many. And then you can choose your directionality. Do you want single or both? Both means that, again, if I apply a filter on the fact table, well, if it's both, then that can filter the dimension table as well. All right. And it's not only the dimension table that will filter the fact table, but the fact table can filter the dimension table. So this is one way you can create relationships. This is not the way I prefer. I prefer just doing it in this view here. So again, so here, where's our tables we have? So we have AP bill here. All right, and we have our item table here. And there should, so if you see there's already a relationship established here. Let me delete this. I'm gonna right click and delete so I can just show you what creating this measure looks like. And for the sake of simplicity, let's bring this over here, and I'm going to zoom in so I can see these better. All right, and you can expand if you need to. So we're looking for item ID in here. All right, so if I just start scrolling down through here. All right, and the nice thing about this is it's alphabetized. So that's one of the things I like about it. Here's item ID. All right, and we need item ID in here. Let me drag this down. All right, there's item ID. All right, so all I have to do is click and hold on this and then drag it over to this one over item ID and release, and you see it automatically creates that relationship. So here we have our item ID columns are related, says many to one, because it recognizes that there's multiple instances for item IDs in the AP Bill All table and only one instance for item IDs in the DIM item table. And then that's going to be a single directionality for the relationship. This relationship will be active, and I click Save. All right, so now we have this relationship established. I can zoom back out. I can adjust this if I need to, move this back. Okay, and now I think finally here we have, you'll notice, let me zoom back in a little. We do have some lines here that are not solid. These are dashed or dotted, right? Why is that? Well, if I double click it to open it, you'll see that make this relationship active is not checked. So this is not an active relationship. If I try to make it active, you're going to notice there are ambiguous paths between. So that means, why is that? Why ambiguous paths? Well, let me click cancel. So there's already a relationship established between, these two tables, right? So if I click on this, we see this relationship is established. Again, if I hover over, so date, and there's some date column in this table. There it is. When created. All right. So when created is related to the date column here. In this one, though, we're referencing a different date column in AR invoice all. So it's not when created. It's if I open it up, it's when paid. Okay. So this one uses when paid. That's related to date in here. You can only have one active relationship at any given time between two tables. All right, so that's why this one is dotted, why it's inactive, because you can only have one active one, and this one is active. So if that's the case, you might be wondering, okay, well, what's the point of an inactive relationship? Like, how does that help you? Like, how do you use an inactive relationship? Well, basically, there's a function called use relationship. All right. So when you incorporate use relationship in a function, essentially what you're doing is you're saying activate this relationship while this measure runs. And so you can utilize that inactive relationship in measures by activating it using use relationship. So again, you imagine you have, a fact table that has multiple dates in it, just like this one does. Maybe you have like a ship date and then a delivery date, and you want both of those related to your date table or calendar table. Well, both of those relationships can't be active. So keep active the one that you are most likely to use, that you're going to use most frequently in your reporting. And then the other one can be inactive, and then you can create a measure that specifically uses that relationship by activating it using use relationship. All right, and then you can use that measure throughout your reporting. All right, so that wraps up our exploration of working with the data model, specifically looking at the relationships between tables in the data model.
For more information on working with Roghnu and exploring how the data portal can help you get the most out of Sage Intacct alongside your other critical business data, scan the code on the screen or click in the link in the description.